exactly that to please you this morning. I now call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 68 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022. We will begin today's meeting in public to hear witness testimony. Afterwards, we will switch to in-camera for the last 45 minutes. A reminder to all, please address your comments through the chair. Screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I am informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection test in advance of the meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and a motion adopted on January 20th, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of foreign ownership and corporate concentration of fishing licenses and quota. I would like to now welcome our panelists for the first hour and a little bit. We have Claudio Bernatchez, General Manager of the Association des Capitaines Propriétaires de la Gaspésie, and represented by video conference, of course. Also by video conference, we have Mr. Kerry Bonnell, Vice President of Sustainability and Engagement for representing Ocean Choice International. And representing the PEI Fishermen's Association, we have Molly Aylward, Executive Director by video conference, and Ian McPherson, Senior Advisor. And also we have representing the Bay of Fundy Inshore Fishermen's Association, we have Colin Sproul, President. So we'll start off with our 5-minute statements. We'll now go to Mr. Bernatchez for 5 minutes or less, please.
Very well. Mr. Chairman, members of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, good morning, and thank you for allowing me this time with you. I'm Claudio Bernatchez, General Manager since 2020 at the Coopérative des Capitaines Propriétaires de la Gaspésie. We're located in Rivière-au-Renard, the maritime fishing capital of Quebec. There are several ways to approach the concept of foreign ownership. From catch perspective, so-called corporate licenses can be traded 100% from one province to another. They also have the particularity of being transferable to foreign interests by up to 49%. Thus, it would be easy to think that the Canadian holder of the 51% could receive help or work under the influence of the foreign holder of the other 49%. For the moment, we are not aware of any such transactions have taken place in our region. As for processing plants, foreign ownership is already present in 2 shrimp processing plants in eastern Quebec. One is obvious, flying the Danish flag, while the other is more subtle, with a Newfoundland entrepreneur supported by an American investment fund. The first has also obtained a license to process Quebec snow crab and a license to process lobster from outside Quebec. The second is trying to do the same. So we can see that once it has a foot in the door, a foreign-owned plant can expand its activities on Canadian soil, especially since processing is under provincial jurisdiction. While I subscribe to the principle of free enterprise, I remain convinced that the fisheries resources of Canadian waters must serve Canadian interests first and foremost, and especially those of the inhabitants of the many coastal communities that have historically depended on the resources of the sea as a means of subsistence and a lever for development. Sometimes one wonders whether fishery resources really belong to Canadians. I take as an example the disproportionate proportion of commercial fishing quotas that belong to large corporations. Why is it that our decision makers ignore this reality when the time comes to allocate new quotas? As I prepared to meet with you, I thought about other mechanisms put in place by other countries that also control fishing activities in Canada. I give as an example the restrictions imposed by our neighbours to the south concerning the protection of marine mammals such as the North Atlantic right whale. There's also the mackerel fishery, which has been under moratorium since last year. How is it that the Americans can still fish it when it is recognized that it is largely the same fish stock as the one found in the Gulf of St. Lawrence? The Canadian fishing industry is paying the price. As a second example, a French actress came over to tell us that we should no longer hunt seals. People listened. Several decades later, DFO is beginning to pay lip service to the imbalance caused by the overabundance of seals. Meanwhile, the Canadian fishing industry is paying a high price. As to license concentration, it takes money to make money. This has become increasingly apparent as fishing licenses are sold at exorbitant prices. Sellers know who to approach when it comes to disposing of their licenses. The average fisherman simply cannot compete with those with greater financial capabilities, and those who do risk to find themselves in a vulnerable economic situation. Imagine the hurdle faced by aspiring owners who are tempted to take over an existing fishing business. This concentration that we're beginning to see represents a risk at the time when the holders of well-stocked license portfolios are ready to sell. We can then see foreign interests come forward to take control of these quotas, and it can be expected that buyers will obtain financial support from a processor to acquire a license or licenses, which in itself constitutes a control agreement. It's still the case today that a fisherman will entrust the financial management of his business to the plant that buys his fish. Concentration of licenses can, in some cases, contribute to the removal of the license holder from the fishing business, as he cannot be everywhere at once. This can contribute to performance culture on board fishing vessels, thereby increasing the risk of accidents. In conclusion, several factors are perceived as threats to the Canadian commercial fishing industry. Foreign ownership and license concentration are two examples, but there are others, and they are closer to home. We need to start thinking about integrated management that will simplify the different regulations in place, and even more so about an ecosystem approach with DFO science. DFO must stop announcing moratoriums just before the start of this fishing season. These announcements have too great an impact, and we're unable to plan for them in advance. Just since 2020, a snow crab area, 12B, mackerel, spring herring, yellowtail, and winter flounder.
Hopefully anything you didn't get to say will come out in questioning. I'll now go to Mr. Sproul for five minutes or less, please.
Committee Chair and members, thank you very much for this opportunity to share our views. I appear before you today on behalf of the Bay of Fundy Inshore Fishermen's Association, where I serve as president. For 28 years, we have represented owner-operator fishing families on the shores of the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia. Our group has a distinguished history of advocating for sustainable fishing practices and community-based fisheries management. Over this time, our commitment to responsible use of resources has led us to partnerships with many groups in academia and the conservation community. We have a history of cooperation with governments and regulators at all levels, earning us a reputation as a valuable ally on ocean issues. Our members are proud of this legacy and committed to preserving our way of life for future generations of Nova Scotians. Corporate concentration and foreign ownership are two sides of the same problem facing Canada's coastal communities. Namely, the clash between medium to large corporations solely focused on reaping ever-increasing profits from public resources, and the duty of government to protect the interests of fishing families, existentially dependent on those same resources. Primary issues relating to this are the conglomeration of lobster processing capacity into fewer and fewer hands, and the unlawful purchasing of lobster licenses by corporations outside the owner-operator framework our members abide by. The question that begs asking is, why would fishermen be concerned about ownership changes of independent maritime lobster processors? The answer deserves attention by government for the benefit of fishing communities. Tonight, on the wharves of Nova Scotia, when a fisherman sells his lobster catch, be it Yarmouth or Sydney, Digby or Lunenburg, they can all expect to receive the same price. But in a free market situation, how can this be? Obviously, someone or some group is fixing that price. If not, fishermen would see variations in the price for their catch based on normal supply and demand pressures from many different exporters. Instead, they face concerted effort to control pricing at the dock. These actions must be a violation of the Federal Competition Act and may constitute a cartel. Section 45, subsection 1 of the Act states, quote, "Every person commits an offense who, with a competitor of that person with respect to a product, conspires, agrees, or arranges to fix the price of the product." Fishermen recognize that lobster markets are ultimately influenced by consumer demand, but they also recognize the downward influence on lobster pricing from this collusion. Harvesters cannot ignore the clear message a region-wide pricing fix sends. After having already suffered for decades in this system, fear is now rising in our communities that things could become even worse. Due to an onslaught of acquisitions in the processing sector by food distribution megacorporations, both foreign and domestic. The second avenue where big business threatens the interests of fishing communities are attempts to vertically integrate the lobster industry through the buying of lobster licenses by unlawful means. These companies seek access to lobster at cheap prices and cut out fishing families in hopes to gain an unfair and profitable advantage. While DFO and the government have made significant progress on this front through recent changes to the Fisheries Act, the resolutions proposed by the department are simplistic, ignoring huge opportunities for reconciliation, and may ultimately be damaging to coastal communities. Specifically, the department's plans to terminate lobster licenses bought by these companies. While certainly demonstrating deterrence, this policy direction will be damaging to the prospects of new entrants to the fishery that changes to the Act were meant to favor. It also seems beyond reason that the department would ignore the potential for this access to integrate martial rights holders into Atlantic fisheries, especially while DFO continues to expropriate access to other species without compensation, arbitrarily move lobster access from one area to another in defiance of their own integrated fisheries management plan, and make ominous statements about expropriation in lobster fisheries. These issues will only be resolved through good faith collaboration between the government and Canada's fishing families. Regulators must recognize that small-scale users of Canadian resources deserve special consideration given the huge, yet diffuse, economic and cultural benefits they deliver to our communities. Committee members, thank you very much. I invite your questions.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Mr. Bonnell for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. I'm here today representing Ocean Choice International. Ocean Choice is a family-owned and operated Newfoundland and Labrador seafood company that was started over 20 years ago by brothers Martin and Blaine Sullivan from the Southern Shore, an area of the province with deep roots in the fishing industry. Today, Ocean Choice is a vertically integrated global seafood company from the sea to the plate. We operate 5 processing facilities in rural coastal communities where we process high-quality seafood that we buy and source from approximately 1,900 independent inshore fish harvesters. We also own and operate a fleet of offshore vessels that catch and process species harvested through quotas that we have access to. Headquartered in St. John's, Newfoundland, Ocean Choice has developed a strong global presence by establishing our own international sales network with offices throughout Canada, the United States, Europe, specifically the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Italy, as well as China and Japan. Our global sales team proudly sells Canada's high-quality seafood to over 30 countries around the world. Through these activities, we employ about 1,700 people from over 300 communities throughout Newfoundland and Labrador. We take our responsibility to the people in the communities that rely on us very seriously. It is what drives our investment decisions and long-term planning. In recent years, we have committed to investments upwards of over $100 million into the seafood sector throughout Atlantic Canada. This is what successful family-run businesses do in the seafood sector in Canada. They reinvest. As a business entirely dependent on a healthy ocean, sustainability is very much at the heart of everything that we do. We are responsible for delivering one of the last sources of wild protein to the world, and we must make sure it's always available. That's why over 90% of the species that we harvest are sustainably sourced through the Marine Stewardship Council Gold Standard for certified fisheries or through a robust fishery improvement program. We understand and respect the immense value and role that all sectors play in creating value for Canada's fisheries and local economies that rely on the fishery. All players, small, medium, and large, are needed to ensure a balanced fishery that can return maximum benefits for Canada. It is disappointing to continuously see our employees and our company targeted just because we're one of the larger seafood companies in Newfoundland and Labrador. Our 1,700 employees work hard at sea and on land, many of them year-round, to build sustainable and successful fishery for the future of Newfoundland and Labrador and the broader region. Ocean Choice believes in the future of our company and our home here in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. It's a future that requires vision, it requires planning and commitment. We make investments today that will support a thriving, sustainable fishery for generations to come. We have invested heavily into fishery, from paying fair market value for every single pound of quota that we have access to, as well as developing markets to ensure the best possible price is paid for Canada's high-quality seafood, to investing in new state-of-the-art technology to modernize the fishing industry. The MV Calvert is a great example of this, creating 70 new year-round full-time jobs in Newfoundland and Labrador. The Calvert is the first new Canadian offshore ground fish vessel to join the offshore fishing sector since the 1980s. Besides direct employment, the Calvert generates millions in annual salaries and economic spin-offs, supporting people, businesses, and industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. As previously mentioned, Ocean Choice operates a fleet of 5 vessels. We also partner with 1,900 independent inshore harvesters, with both representing about 50% of our business. So there is a role, obviously, from our standpoint, for all sectors in this industry. Improving collaboration within the fishing industry is essential for achieving a more sustainable, equitable, and efficient fishery that will benefit everyone. A shared responsibility between the harvesting sector, plant workers, processors, governments, unions, and other fishery stakeholders is required for Newfoundland and Labrador to continue to have successful local industry that competes on a world stage. For the purposes of your study, I wanted to reaffirm that we are a 100% Canadian-owned and operated business, and we fully respect and abide by government policy with respect to the independence of the inshore fleet in Atlantic Canada. I hope my statement and subsequent commentary today has and will instill a message that we are an unapologetically proud Newfoundland and Labrador seafood company that provides significant employment and value creation in the coastal communities in which we operate and support. We are bullish when it comes to the future of the seafood sector as an environmentally sustainable product with well-documented health benefits and global demand that is expected to grow substantially over the next decade and beyond. Thank you for the opportunity to make a statement. I welcome the committee's questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Bonnell. We'll now go to the PEI Fishermen's Association for a statement of 5 minutes or less. I don't know which of you are doing the statement or if you're doing it jointly, but you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Both Mr. McPherson and myself will be presenting the statement. I'll start and he'll conclude. Thank you. On behalf of the PEI Fishermen's Association, I would like to thank the Chair and the Fisheries Committee for the opportunity to once again respond to issues that impact our fishing community. Our organization represents over 1,250 Prince Edward Island captains on important topics that affect fisher livelihoods and futures. Today's topic of foreign ownership and corporate concentration of fishing licenses and quota is one such topic. We all understand that industries need to change and evolve to meet consumer demands, be it on the boat, at the plant, or in the store or restaurant. We understand that as transportation and refrigeration techniques improve, our local seafood resources are enjoyed by an increasing number of people around the world. We also understand that the supply chains must be efficient to meet these needs. The traditional supply chain of local independent fish harvesters supplying plants for processing and then furtherance to national and international markets is a good model of spreading wealth, keeping coastal communities vibrant, and maximizing government returns and investments. There are many checks and balances in the current system to keep this supply chain efficient and profitable. Ownership concentration can be led to reduce competition for products, fewer or elimination of jobs in coastal communities, and potential loss of food sovereignty in Canada. Today, we would like to expand on the concept of food sovereignty and food security. Growing up in a country of bountiful food resources, we have never had to think of our food resources being restricted or, even worse, being grown or harvested here, but not under the direct control of Canadians. Our seafood industry has many challenges in terms of declining stocks and how the stocks are managed, but this is not the focus of discussion today. In terms of corporate concentration, we are seeing more plants owned by the same ownership groups in addition to refrigeration assets and other parts of the supply chain. Ownership of offshore licenses by corporations is also a concern. This makes it difficult for independent operators to access supply chain resources at competitive prices. With a primary focus on shareholder value and growth, these can be elements that not only put pressure on ocean resources, but can also expedite the closure of many major employers in coastal communities. It is important to note that in some cases, foreign companies have varying degrees of government ownership, which does not make for a level playing field. These companies are also driven by growth and maximizing shareholder return, regardless of where the shareholders reside. The majority of their profits go out of Canada. In many of these discussions, it is lost that owner-operators are independent small businesses, many of whom employ 2 to 3 crew members. These business owners have significant personal investments, pay taxes, and contribute to the volunteer base in their local communities. The resources of these small businesses is contingent on a well-functioning supply chain. Fishers are looking for a fair and equitable return, not an adversarial relationship that has winners and losers. I turn it over to Mr. McPherson now.
Thank you, Molly. So what may be some of the potential solutions to ensure food sovereignty and food security are maintained? Number 1, declare Canadian seafood a critical resource. This designation will enhance current controls on concentration of foreign ownership. Number 2, lower the Competition Bureau trigger threshold for all seafood company acquisitions, domestic and foreign. Right now, only large acquisitions are investigated by the Bureau. Number 3, make a concentrated effort to market seafood to Canadians, as we typically have one of the lowest seafood consumption rates in the world. Number 4, work with fishing organizations to develop license retirement plans that will increase the viability of current and future independent owner-operators. This will also lead to an increased diversification of catches and operating efficiency. Number 5, reevaluate the drive to be the top seafood volume exporter, focus more on value-added products. Number 6, exempt seafood-related products that enter and leave Prince Edward Island from Confederation Bridge tolls. Canada is the envy of many countries in terms of our resources. Our plentiful freshwater supplies, clean oceans, and ample food supplies are not easily duplicated. Our current system is not problem-free, but we must look proactively down the road. Companies and countries are after our resources, and this pressure will only increase. As dead zones become larger in the oceans, the seafood that feeds the world will be from more concentrated areas. The Government of Canada must make food sovereignty and food security a top priority. Once we lose control of our resources, they will not be easily be gained back, if at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson. That was almost dead on time, which usually don't happen when there's 2 people giving an opening statement. We'll now proceed to our first round of questions. I go to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question to Mr. Bonnell. Mr. Bonnell, and thank you to all the witnesses for taking part today. I'm sorry, I always forget that. Mr. Bonnell, have you heard talk of any agreements called supply agreements in Newfoundland and Labrador fishery between harvesters and processors?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Small, for your question. Listen, there are a variety of relationships that occur between harvesting sector and the processing sector in the province. We are part of those relationships, of course. So some of them would involve direct engagement between a harvester and a processor in terms of supply agreements. Some of them could involve just direct relationships between harvesters and processors in terms of harvesting and processing product, helping get product to market. There are a whole wide variety of agreements that take place between the harvesting and processing sector in the province to ensure a fair market price for harvesters and ensure we take the product and get it to market in a proper form.
To Mr. Bonnell, the current, in your opinion, Mr. Bonnell, is the current shutdown of the crab and the shrimp fishery linked in any way to corporate control in the fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador?
Well, no. I mean, Newfoundland and Labrador is a bit unique from that standpoint. We actually have a collective agreement that exists in this province where fish prices are set based on negotiations. It's an independent process established by the government of Newfoundland and Labrador. We take a position forward to the province and to the independent arbitrator every year. The processing sector and the harvesting sector would do the same. A round of discussions will take place. In some cases, agreements will get reached on price. When an agreement can't get reached, it'll go to arbitration, and an independent arbitrator will select that price. So Whether there's 2 companies negotiating on that front or 20 companies negotiating, it's an independent process that sets price in the province. And I would say in terms of corporate concentration, there is a very healthy level of processing sector, a healthy level of companies in the processing sector in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, which I'll speak, I can speak more accurately on. If you compare it to other forms of food production in Canada, other industries in Canada, the level of corporate concentration would pale in comparison. I think if you're looking at the beef sector or the dairy sector, some other sectors of the economy. So again, Newfoundland and Labrador is a bit unique, but we have a very much an independent process to establish pricing in this province.
Mr. Preddy gave testimony last week, and he was mentioning control over harvesters by processors. So I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to this. If harvesters are completely independent of processing companies by means of either financing arrangements or anything else, is there competition, free and open competition for harvesters' product between processors in Newfoundland, Labrador?
Well, I think, yes, there is free and open competition between harvesters and processors in Newfoundland and Labrador. I can speak for our company. We completely abide by the Atlantic policies that exist right now, and owner-operator fleet separation policies and the preservation of the inshore fleet. Like any group, we look to have relationships with harvesters. I mean, we manage 5 land-based processing facilities in Newfoundland and Labrador that employ about 1,000 people. You have to have a steady supply of raw material to operate those facilities to ensure that you're going to employ people on a seasonal basis and in some cases on a year-round basis. So those relationships exist. They're critical to maintain the capacity and the infrastructure that we have. In terms of pricing, what I will say is, this year is a unique year, and we've talked a lot. Your committee has talked a lot about the situation in the snow crab fishery this year. But if you go back over the past number of years, 2022 record prices for snow crab to harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador. 2021 record prices for snow crab for harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador. And if you go back the last number of years, we've had a fairly stable regime in place in terms of pricing. So I think fair market price has certainly been attained in the harvesting sector.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bonnell. I'm going to turn over the rest of my time to Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just
Mr.
a little
Spurl.
over a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Spurl. Do lobster understand where the line is drawn between LFA lobster areas 33, 34, and 41?
No, they don't. They don't understand where those lines are. Who catches them?
So in LFA 41, which is about 3 times the size of Nova Scotia, one company has a complete monopoly on all of that and has asked for an increased TAC as a result. What would the impact of that be on the inshore lobsters, since lobsters don't seem to know where that border is?
Well, ultimately, the impact would be that any increase in lobster TAC given to a mega corporation fishing on one vessel would be out of the back pockets of inshore fishermen. There's one lobster resource in the Gulf of Maine, and there's no science to support that they're separate or that a fishery take in LFA 41 won't have an effect in the adjacent LFAs. It's also important to point out that a vast majority of Clearwater's landings come, 80-90% of their landings come adjacent to the most important place for lobsters in Canada, which is the lobster box on Browns Bank, adjacent to the closed area, where they fish intensely right up to the border of that. So there are really serious implications for it.
Does anyone police it to make sure that they don't go over?
Sorry, Mr. Perkins, you're gone out of time. A few seconds, you wouldn't get a question in anyway. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. Question to Mr. Spurl. In your opening statement, you reference the corporate backing of lobster license purchases, and these are my notes, so if I'm turning around. And you also reference the buying of lobster license by unlawful methods. Do you care to expand a bit to the committee on what unlawful methods are being used?
I was referencing trust agreements, which are used to purchase lobster licenses in different LFAs with a nominal owner, allowing vertically integrated companies that want to buy, process, export lobster to own trap to table access.
So should these agreements, they actually can influence the ownership of the core license? the fisher that's on the boat?
Not lawfully, but they certainly do. And
I realize not lawfully, but you say through the trust agreements this is occurring?
yeah, and there's been a lot of good work taking place over the last few years by.
Because this was supposed to be outlawed, was it not, under the owner-operator policy?
Yes,
That's right.
it always was unlawful, but there's changes to the act have been made to make it harder. What I was referencing was the government's intent to terminate the licenses that are found to be in violation, when clearly the purpose of the changes to the act were to improve the situation for new entrants to the fishery. But were the government to terminate and vaporize lobster access in the community, not only do the new entrants to the fishery lose, but also trap builders, fuel suppliers, grocery stores, and all the other related industries.
Okay. I just want to go to Mr. McPherson or to Ms. Aylward. Is this occurring in PEI as well? Do you have any knowledge of this occurring in Prince Edward Island?
I can't name any specifics right now, but it's certainly as the price of fleets increases, I guess our concern is certainly the financing and making sure that adequate resources are there to finance these purchases. I think on an earlier committee, it was mentioned that kind of fishing organizations were supporting that the financing of fleets be opened up. We were really more focused on either Loctite arrangements with processors and suppliers or family members, not to open it up to a wide spectrum. And that's one of our concerns right now, is that there's a lot of options there.
Good. I want to Mr. McPherson, you referenced naming Canadian seafood as a critical resource. Could you expand a bit on what benefit that would be to the fisher and to Canada? And if you'd have more detail, there's a couple of items I would like if you would submit the information to the committee. You can speak to that one. Also, the lowering the threshold for review under corporate affairs. But briefly, critical resource, that's the first time I heard that comment.
Well, I was reading an article just the other day there in terms of cobalt and one of our countries, another country just trying to corner that for the EV market and be a supply of the batteries. And I think we have to think of food in that context. And just, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's a fairly good balance, but there's a lot of very rapid buyout of family operations and amalgamation that's happening at a very quick pace.
Is that at the processing level?
Yes.
The processing
yes.
Level. Yes. Yeah.
But ultimately that translates down to the harvester level in terms of less competition and perhaps more onerous restrictions.
Okay, I'm not sure my time, Chair, but I'm sure you'll remind me. I want a quick question to Mr. Bonnell. Mr. Bonnell, in your comments you referenced that your employees were being targeted. Could you expand on that? It concerned me when you made that statement that employees would be targeted. How are they being targeted and why?
Well, as a business, I think the best way to respond to that is there's a bit of an echo in the room there. My apologies. As a business, we get targeted because we're a large company, and it could be the employees, it could be the company itself. We're quite proud of the fact that we're a family-run business. Martin and Blaine Sullivan come from a fishing family. Their father's a fisherman. My family, I came out of the small boat fishery. We built this company from the ground up. We're quite proud of what we've achieved. We are a larger company, and we know there's a responsibility that comes with that. But we feel we're unfairly targeted as a company that employs the number of people that we do in the region and takes harvester product to market and provides fair market value. In most years, 2023 is a challenging year. We all accept that, but we feel we're unfairly targeted as a company in the region. Hopefully that clarifies.
Chair, how much time do I have?
45 seconds.
Oh, thank you. I want to go back to Mr. Sproul, and maybe Mr. McPherson could get in. You referenced corporate concentration. Something that I hear a lot in the community is, and amongst fishers, is fewer buyers independent, that there being, and we hear a lot about our favorite topic these days, Chinese interest in the purchasing of lobster buying operations. what would you recommend government deal? How would they? Because the processing plants and the buyers are all regulated and controlled by provincial governments. Have you expressed a concern to provincial governments about this ongoing corporate concentration at that level? And if you did, could you provide that to the committee for this report?
Your time is up, Mr. Morrissey, but I would suggest to Mr. McPherson or who's there with him, Ms. Aylward, if they could respond in writing to the committee to that particular point. So we'll now go to Madame Debian pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses who are here today. I'm going to address my questions to Mr. Bernatchez. Mr. Bernatchez, you are concerned, and I understand. In your testimony, you mentioned that the Canadian fishing industry, and I know Quebec is a big part of that, is paying the price certainly for a certain lack of power vis-a-vis our southern neighbor, and this in regard to the spring herring or yellowtail flounder and others. It seems that the fishing industry is destabilized, and then we see come along the concentration of foreign companies that install themselves. In your opinion, how can you assess the risk of the disappearance of fishing expertise in our regions? Is the risk of disappearing expertise sufficiently big that DFO take measures to revert this trend? Every time a fishery is made more fragile, you need actions from DFO to try to compensate for the foreign threats. There might be, otherwise there might tend to be people willing to just throw in the towel. That can certainly be the case where we have crews just leaving the boats because the catch isn't there. So therefore the wages aren't there. There's no revenue. So as soon as you weaken a fishery, you're going to expose communities, one at a time to disappearing expertise. So what can be done then with succession planning? I mean, processing plants can come and install themselves with their big tentacles, but if they cannot find the know-how and the expertise in the communities, might that be something that the DFO take into account? Absolutely, because the fishery, is involves many different actors. If there are actors who are not willing to partake in the dance, it's going to make other actors more fragile. So you need to take into account the industry as a whole. When it comes to the succession planning, it's more and more difficult to find interested parties because of the decreasing catch. Also, the costs have been explosive. A new entrant, has to assume very significant financial risk. So this loss of know-how opens the door to foreigners and not to these factory-type large boats, and this at the detriment of our regions. At present, and as I said in my opening statement, we don't have examples of foreign entities coming and installing themselves in terms of the capture. It's much more subtle than that. But if we reached a point where, especially those who have corporate license holders, end up having to throw in the towel, then that would certainly open the door to foreign interests to become partners with, local entities. What kind of actions or recommendations could this committee make? What would be the most significant recommendations this committee could make to reverse the trends? Well, I would say, just like any kind of activity, when you replace regulations, you have to make sure you have the means to make them enforced. There's no point in having a whole series of regulations if you're not able to have people in the field who can observe what is unfolding in terms of respect for the rules. So before going ahead with new legislations or regulations, let's see to it that what is already in place is being respected. Is the fishing milieu in the Gulf and in the Gaspé concerned? There's a great deal of apprehension. Given all of the moratorium announced just in the last 3 years alone, there are not many fleet that aren't asking themselves the question, what's going to happen to us? We understand that the catch is cyclical. But when you have minimally 5 moratoria that have been announced recently, there's good reason for concern. And there's especially good reason to reflect seriously about an ecosystemic approach with FO science. You have to take into account all of the impacts that one resource has on another. Thank you very much.
Madam Devienne, we'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. My first question is for Mr. Spruill. Mr. Spruill, UFAWU Unifor put out a petition asking for the end of foreign ownership and quotas. And I'm wondering if you can provide just some of your general thoughts on this petition and, just general thoughts on that, please.
Greenland is a wholly owned government, or a corporation wholly owned by the government of Denmark. They have made acquisitions in Nova Scotia of A&L Seafoods and in Newfoundland, Quincy, one of Newfoundland's largest processors. None of these actions are in keeping with federal law. Royal Greenland, is taking from the people of Newfoundland and taking from the people of Nova Scotia and creating profit for a foreign government. It seems beyond reason that regulators wouldn't have taken issue with it by this point. We see the same thing. We see the same thing with domestic companies as well. In Nova Scotia, we've seen Champlain, which is an equity firm, designed to generate profits for shareholders, acquire Lobsters R Us Seafoods, Premium Seafoods, Captain Dan's Fisheries, Shetty Camp Fisheries, Riverside Lobster International, Down East Cape Bald Packers, Petit de Gras Packers, and even more through subsidiaries of Cape Bald, as well as Boston Lobster Company and Boston Wholesale Lobster in the United States. Most ominously, we see Champlain and others operating along the same lines, starting to move into acquisition of bait dealers and bait freezers and packers in Atlantic Canada. It's very ominous for us. Some of these acquisitions are a bit of a paper tiger in the sense that fishermen in Nova Scotia still have free will to sell their catch to who they choose to sell their catch to. And some of these lobster buyers that are being acquired because of their access to product, but at any time fishermen could leave those buyers and move to another one. So we've seen their intent move into trying to control the bait supply to ensnare fishermen in the future, and it's very, very concerning to the industry.
Thank you, Mr. Spruill. Thank you for that answer. My next question is for Mr. Bonnell. Mr. Bonnell, What are your thoughts on the, if there were to be a move forward on ending foreign ownership and quotas, what would be the impacts on Ocean Choice International, and what would be the impacts that you would foresee on local communities?
Yeah, well, I mean, from our standpoint, we operate as a 100% Canadian-owned and operated business. I'll note last week, Mark Waddell appeared before the committee and on the beneficial ownership survey and verified in Atlantic Canada, at least, that 98% of all licenses were in compliance in terms of domestic ownership. So from our standpoint, as long as the rules are followed, if there are, foreign companies investing in the region, as long as the rules are being followed and those aren't being broken, then there's really nothing more for us to add on that front. We operate our business. We focus on running our own business as a company, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Waddell. Has there been any discussion around what steps Ocean Choice International would be taking if an end of foreign ownership and quotas were put into place?
That's not something we've discussed because, again, from our standpoint on the quota side, there's full compliance in Atlantic Canada. Again, a forensic audit conducted by the Government of Canada over the past several months verifying that 98% of all licenses are in compliance in terms of Canadian ownership. From our standpoint, it's a non-issue. If it were to become an issue, obviously, at some point down the road, that's something we would consider commentary on. But as it stands today, we just don't see it as an issue, and that was verified by the Government of Canada last week. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. My next question again, Mr. Bonnell, the public registry, which is, of course, a recommendation that came out in the 2019 study on West Coast beneficial ownership. It talks about information. Just going to get my thoughts together. But basically, what are your thoughts on this public registry and any implications that it might have on fisheries on the East Coast?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not fully up to speed on the West Coast occurrence, but again, on the East Coast, what I'll say, and I've indicated in my opening comments that certainly we are fully compliant with owner, operator, and fleet separation policies and the preservation of the inshore fleet in Atlantic Canada. I think Jennifer Mooney, I believe it was last week, made an appearance and said they've pretty well investigated or audited about a quarter of all inshore licenses in Atlantic Canada and saw a high level of compliance with those policies. So I'll take that again from the Government of Canada as a real positive that the changes that have occurred are being followed and are being respected overall.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Bonnell, I believe, because I'll run out of time. Just your overall thoughts around the differences. I know that you're very much immersed on the East Coast, but any thoughts that you can provide to us as a committee around the differences around what's happening on the East versus the West Coast, some of the benefits or disadvantages?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can add on that topic, I'm not immersed on the West Coast, but I mean, I am on the Fisheries Council of Canada. I deal with a lot of colleagues on the West Coast, a lot of family-run businesses, a lot of companies that have similar priorities to us and similar objectives to provide meaningful value and create meaningful employment for their members, for their companies, but also to provide fair market value for harvesters. I mean, that's my understanding and my evidence that we all have a common goal here to grow the Canadian seafood industry. Ian is on this session. Ian and I have spent a lot of time together over the years talking about this. We need more cooperation, more alignment to create more value in the global marketplace. And I think that's where our resources and energy should best be focused.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
I'll be sharing a little bit of my time with Mr. Perkins as well. I want to start out with Mr. Bonnell, if I could. Mr. Bonnell, how high in the priority list does a constant supply of product factor into your company's operations in order to meet your market, your sales?
I would say it's critical on both the inshore and offshore portion of our business. Stable quota shares are critical to us in our offshore business. We employ several hundred people in our offshore boats. Some of that product is land-based processed in the processing facilities and the service supports that are provided for that. On the harvesting side, we source raw material from about 1,900 independent fish harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador. That raw material is absolutely critical for the 5 land-based processing operations that we have in the province that employ about 1,000 people. So it's something that that's critically important to our business. Stable quota share in our offshore, stable quota supply, obviously, for our land-based operations are very important to us.
like yours would do everything they could to make sure that they had a reliable source of product?
Well, we do what we can within the rules that are provided. So it's important to have relationships to ensure we have raw material for those operations. But also, I would say, Mr. Arnold, it's critically important as part of that relationship is to provide the best market value we can for harvesters in terms of shore price to our businesses. So we have a global marketing, sales, and distribution network that puts a lot of time and energy annually into trying to maximize market opportunities for that product. So everybody wins, both the harvesting sector and the processing sector.
Thank you. I'll switch now to Mr. Sproul and Mr. McPherson. What we've been talking about is a lot of the foreign ownership of licenses and quotas, and the foreign control or centralized control of those licenses and quotas. Are there other factors that would determine where a harvester may take their product to, such as supply chain for their operations, ice and fuel and gear and so on? Would control over the licenses and quotas be the only piece that would need to be looked at, or are there other pieces as well?
Most fish harvesters in Atlantic Canada have long-standing relationships with the people that buy their seafood from them. Frequently, they're provided with other services at the dock as an incentive to continue to sell. But the concerns that are being raised by the industry about the consolidation of bait supply and the potential for price control from corporate consolidation is seeing the bigger packers be aggregated, but also these larger corporations moving down the chain, purchasing, on the dock buyers without even the knowledge of the fishermen who are selling to them at that point.
Anything quick before I have to switch to Mr. Perkins?
I just wanted to add, as Colin mentioned, that we've got companies that are getting a pretty substantial foothold in the marketplace and controlling all those costs that he just mentioned there. Now, we share that concern for sure.
We'll go to Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. Mr. Sproul, you went through a number of foreign corporate interests that are buying buyers and other parts. What about China? I know, for example, in the South Shore, I'm seeing China buy an awful lot of our buyers. What's the impact of that? I also understand they control the freight forwarder at the Halifax airport.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Perkins. I'm really happy to hear you raise that issue. I think that one of the most important things that government can do is ensure national Canadian control of our logistics chain within the country. It's not something that should be privately controlled in any form, and it puts everybody under the influence of the people that own the logistics locally. Atlantic Chican in southwest Nova Scotia has bought at least 6 of its local competitors over the last year and a half, and it shows that attempt to consolidate. I think it bears pointing out that Chinese entry into the marketplace for seafood in Canada has been beneficial in some ways to the industry, but we need to strike a balance between making Canada open for business and making pathways for our products to new markets in Asia, and also protecting the interests of fishermen and protecting the sovereignty of our supply chain from Yarmouth to China.
These are under provincial license.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Your time is up. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 5 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Bernatchez. Just to be sure before I start my questions, you represent what kind of owners? Are these crab boat owners? Well, just about all species, crab, shrimp, groundfish. Now, for some years, for crab and lobster, and my question is more in regard to crab, the cost of license have gone up exorbitantly, and you say that if you have corporations who hold those licenses, it's a threat for communities. We have fishers who have left my region to go to your region to fish crab. So we are losing the expertise in our region, but we're losing captains and fishers. And for residence criterion that's different in New Brunswick compared to Quebec. In New Brunswick is much shorter compared to 2 years in Quebec. Do you think that is fair? Now, what would happen if fishers from New Brunswick were to come and buy licenses here in Quebec? What would your reaction be to that? As I stated earlier, I'm in favor of the principle of free enterprise. This can happen. We can't prevent it. To answer your specific question, Mr. Cormier, if we could have regulations that are put in place by DFO be enforced across the country, even in the different regions of a same province, and what we do be standardized, and ensure that there are no surprises such as this one, because I don't understand why the residence criteria would differ from one province to another. I don't understand why there would be residence criteria or constraints imposed on different regions in the same province for license transactions. I don't see the sense in that, and I could give you other examples of differences between one place and another.
Same kind of question. In 2019, there's a lobster fisherman from PEI, Brody Desroches, that bought a crab license from my region also for a couple of $1 million. The price tag was probably between $10 and $15 million. At that time, DFO said that all rules were followed. Do you believe that, and do you know that case?
Certainly the concern of a lot of licenses, the price of a lot of licenses is a big concern, rather. And it'd be interesting to see the economics on that, and I guess how many other bids there were, and what those bids were in terms of where is the true market value for a license like that.
So, but I guess my question is more like, do you think that all rules were followed in that purchase of that license?
I don't know the specifics of that, but one of the things that collectively as harvester groups we're advocating on is that there are very tough and rigorous rules that are being followed. So you get into confidentiality.
Of course, and I understand that. So my father was a lobster fisherman almost all his life. As you just said earlier, the lobster license are sky high, if I can say, worth a lot now. It's difficult, I think, for the next generation, the younger generation, to buy some license. It's difficult for them to go to the bank and have a credit margin or whatever a loan. So we have some program for First Nation that, give First Nation the opportunity to buy some permit. It's all good. But do you think we can have also some kind of program like that for younger generation of fishermen that want, to keep, this tradition going and, be able to buy some license? Like, do you think there should be some program in place that we should do across Canada to make sure that, younger generation can still continue fishing?
Absolutely. We've got quite a good program on Prince Edward Island, I must say. It's not more on the financing, but it's to teach the skills of what you need to do and how to run your business to be successful and survive. And I've had calls from other organizations, and we've shared that information, but
quick question, do you think the new fishing regulation make sure that all those deals that are going on the side sometime, that the new regulation they made sure that it's not happening again, or it's still happening?
Well, our concern is it's still happening.
Excuse me, Mr. Cormier. Excuse me, Mr. Cormier. Your time is up, but we'd ask Mr. McPherson to probably send that answer in writing to the committee. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bernacchi, in the context of your testimony and what we've heard you say, are you surprised to hear that there are fishers and fisher associations that are asking to testify confidentially, or does that not come as a surprise? I couldn't tell you why some want to testify confidentially. I do hope we could all feel comfortable about testifying. It is my hope, my wish. I don't think there's anything to hide. Let's be transparent. Let's continue to develop a fishing industry in Canada that takes into account all realities, but let's do this in a standardized way. Thank you. Earlier you talked about regulation. Regulation implies penalties, and penalties imply oversight of regulations to be able to apply those penalties. Are you able to confirm that out there in the field there is a need to increase inspectors to observe what's going on in regard to penalties, and could this have an impact on the investment? How we go about this, I do not have an answer. However, I think that if there were resources put in place by our governments to see to it that the regulations were enforced, we'd be able to avoid certain situations, such as ones we've heard about today, and maybe other ones to come down the pipe. Because it's like all things, if you're not there to maintain order, then chaos will ensue. Do you think it's necessary to have financial penalties? Well, financial penalties, of what I know about them, that are imposed don't hurt very much. No, they don't hurt. You know, I mean, if there's an illegal license or there's a doubtful situation, remove the license. That will hurt. Thank you.
Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Mr. Sproul. Mr. Sproul, if we were to move ahead with ending foreign ownership and quotas, what are your thoughts around the enforcement of this, and do you feel that it'd be easily manageable? What are your thoughts around that?
Is in fisheries management and in fisheries and not in regulation, but I think that there needs to be some type of an ownership test applied to the corporations that are involved, and I think if they're found to be in violation, that the quotas that they're possessing should be returned back to the Canadian public and used for the principles of new entry into the fishery and for reconciliation.
Thank you, Mr. Sproul. Any additional thoughts around the differences that we're seeing on the East versus the West, and advantages, benefits, and takeaways that we should be considering as a committee?
I certainly do. I think that the situation, the dire situation, the sad situation of independent inshore fishermen in British Columbia should be a warning to everybody in this room that the government and fishermen should work together and do everything we can to prevent a similar situation from destroying East Coast fisheries, which have proven to be the bedrock of our economy and an economic renaissance in Atlantic Canada and in British Columbia, where we see overwhelming corporate concentration of the industry. There's a massive difference in scale of the benefits being returned to coastal communities from the fishery that we see here in Atlantic Canada, and I think that we should heed it all as an ominous warning.
Thank you, Mr. Sproul. Mr. Bonnell, I had asked you quite a few questions in the last round, and I just wanted to provide you with an opportunity. Do you have any final thoughts for the committee before I wrap up my questions that we should be considering in our recommendations moving forward?
No, I think as I made the point earlier, on all I can do is speak for the Atlantic Coast, and I think certainly from the Atlantic Coast, we have a high level of compliance, both in terms of domestic ownership as well as following the existing inshore policies as they exist. We'll continue to operate within that framework and respect that, and hopefully provide value for both the harvesting and processing sectors. We're all committed to rural Newfoundland and Labrador, in our case, rural Atlantic Canada, as businesses and operators, and we need to focus on more cooperation, would be my standpoint.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Bragdon for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm yielding my time to Mr. Perkins. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sproul, it was discussed earlier by MP Small the issue of supply agreements. We used to have trust agreements, but the owner-operator made trust agreements illegal. But smart lawyers managed to find another way around that through supply agreements. So while you mentioned earlier that fishermen always have a choice as to which buyer they sell to, in the case of supply agreements, there are supply agreements, as I understand it, in Nova Scotia. They don't really have a choice, particularly when it involves financing their vessel. Is that correct?
Yes, so I think what we've seen are companies who were attempting vertical integration through trust agreements have diverted to other legal mechanisms, be they controlling financial agreements or supply agreements, which demand that they deliver their lobster to a certain lobster buyer who was the real owner before that, when the operator was a nominal owner, and now they're being forced to sell to those vertically integrated companies at a depleted price below everyone else in the industry.
And back on the first question I asked you, which was about LFA 41, the impact of giving Clearwater a larger TAC, I think the current TAC is 72,000. Is it 72,000 tons, I believe?
I don't have the numbers right here.
The impact of them having a larger TAC without, as I can see, any science to support it, would mean what to the inshore?
Well, one thing that it means to the inshore that's more subtle to discern is that it would create downward price pressure on the industry, allowing Clearwater to put a lot more lobsters onto the market in advance of the opening of the winter lobster fisheries in southwest Nova Scotia, which is an activity that we've seen over and over for decades, a further strength in the corporation's ability to affect lobster prices regionally.
And with regard to China's acquisition of fish buyers and other businesses, are they having an impact yet on price?
Well, I think it was clear to all fishermen that the entry of Chinese buyers into the marketplace has initially had an upward influence on price, and lobster fishermen pre-pandemic were enjoying good lobster prices, and during the pandemic. I think the fear lies in the conglomeration, and that the clear answer here is that there needs to be some mechanism put in place to deter companies from owning more than a certain amount of lobster processing or exporting ability, and that I don't want to paint all Chinese entry into the marketplace with one brush and say it's negative. Clearly, we need markets in Asia, and we need to keep developing more markets for lobster. But we need to do it in a way that prevents any one company from gaining too much control, and we need to grapple with the issue of collusion between these companies to set region-wide price fixes in the lobster industry, which is unlawful.
And are they paying market price for these companies?
Well, we wouldn't be party to what they're paying, but I suggest that they're paying really high prices for these companies. The other thing we're seeing is the nominal staying on of the original ownership of the companies too, which I believe is in attempts to retain the relationships, the personal relationships between fishermen and the buyers.
And I've heard lobster buyers in southwest Nova Scotia have to take their lobsters now to Moncton, New York, or Chicago to get them out because of the foreign control of the live seafood terminal at Halifax. Is that true?
Yes, I've heard the same reports as well, and it's putting Canadian-owned buyers at a disadvantage, clearly.
A disadvantage not only in transportation, but in terms of, I presume, the cost that the freight forwards are.
Yes, certainly the cost would be greater.
I'll yield my time to Mr. Small or Mr. Arnold.
How much time do we have, Mr. Chair?
35 seconds.
Okay. I guess just quickly, again, we seem to be in a mixture of federal or provincial jurisdiction. Is the processing under federal or provincial jurisdiction? Would the federal regulations have any sway in that, in the ownership of processing or any piece that way?
In in Nova Scotia, licensing of fish buyers and processors is a provincial matter. But I think there is a role for the federal government to play, especially when it comes to foreign ownership. It seems to me that the onus switches at that point to the federal government to stand up for Canadians and to stand up for the Atlantic provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Callaway to finish off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's good to see everyone here online and in person with respect to this study. And I'm going to focus on Mr. Sproul if I can. I'm going to ask a couple of questions and then let it rip in terms of your answers to us. But I'm curious in terms of trying to encapsulate the discussion that we're having today. You know, in terms of creating a stronger economy in Atlantic Canada when it comes to the seafood sector, ensuring that there is a balance where there needs to be balance with Canadian-owned companies. What are three things that we could be doing now in a short period of time, and what are three long-term things that could strengthen that? So those are two questions. And the third question is around a question that Mr. Perkins brought up that I'm interested in unpacking a bit and understanding that processing, for the most part, follows under the domain of the provinces. But you mentioned national control of logistics, the logistics chain, rather. And I'm wondering if we can unpack that a bit. Number one, why it's important. It's obvious probably to many of us around the table, but I want to kind of go deep on that. And your thoughts in terms of that relationship between the province and the feds to tighten that up where we can.
Thanks again for the question. In the near term, I think government needs to recognize that in Canada's most valuable fishery, lobster, that bait is a critical issue, and we're facing a bait crisis because of conservation measures that have been enacted by the department in pelagics. I think the government needs to create pathways to connect lobster fishermen with bait through quota allocations. I think that the government needs to consider the fact that we're all here today to try and preserve the future of this industry, and that new entrants are now faced with a competitor, and the competitor is the Department of Fisheries in its willingness and in its need to integrate moderate livelihood fishers into our industry. But the government needs to take a step back and recognize that each action that they take has an unintended consequence on new entrants to the fishery, and it may be harder at this time than ever for a new guy or gal to join this industry. I think that's something that we all need to recognize. In the long term, the logistics are a big part. And I think more importantly of all, for me, that the most important thing the government needs to do is it's no secret that there's a blue economic strategy being pursued by the current government. And the ocean is a finite place, even though it seems really big to everybody else. The places that fishermen need to operate to remain profitable can sometimes be very small. And I think there needs to be a recognition made by the government, rather, that small-scale users of the resource, like inshore fishermen, deserve special consideration when it comes to carving out safe and sustainable places for them to fish in the future.
And if we can unpack the better management control of the logistics chain, I think that's an important one to connect on.
I think it comes down to money. I think there needs to be investment by provincial and federal government in Atlantic Canada to develop logistics that are independent of lobster buyers and lobster shippers, and that it's clearly a conflict for somebody to be buying lobsters at the dock, controlling the only way to ship them to Asia, and profiting on both ends and everywhere in the middle. So I think that's going to require investment by provincial and federal governments, and I encourage those governments to work together in that end.
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
Well, actually, it's 40 seconds, but I'd like to take it to have time to change out for our in-camera portion.
Then let's make it happen. I'm a generous
Mr.
man.
Callaway. on a Monday and everything as it is. I want to say thank you to our witnesses, Mr. Bernacci, Mr. Sproul, Mr. Bonnell, Ms. Aylward, and Mr. McPherson for joining us here today and sharing your knowledge with the committee as we embark and navigate through this study. So again, thank you one and all. We now have to sign out. Some of us have to sign back on again. Thank you.
you.